All right, guys, welcome back to a Summer of Ecclesiastes. Now, as we continue through this, if you haven't checked it out already, there's a side note that'll be posting around this time, and it'll show you some examples of this out of Psalm 24. Now, what I want you to look at, though, is this is more or less the aspect of what we call a chiasm. It's a Hebrew writing device that's really clever, and sometimes entire books of the Bible are arranged like this. If you want an example, go to a source called the Bible Project. They show examples. I believe it's the book of Esther is written entirely as a chiasm. And I might do a side note on that, but anyway, it's really interesting stuff. But the idea of a chiasm, what it does is it starts off with a concept. So it starts off with, let's say, point A. All right, and point A is statement A. Okay, and then it goes to statement B, then it goes to statement C, then statement D. But with a chiasm, what's going to happen here, and you see one kind of in Psalm 24, verse 6, I believe. And you'll see a statement, and then it'll reverse, and you'll see, like letter D, it'll repeat whatever letter D was about. Then it'll repeat what letter C was about, what letter B, what letter A. And so you've got, let's say it's the, you start off with the character walking down the street, and then he enters the house, and then he goes and he climbs into bed. Okay, those would be A, B, C. And then the next thing is someone getting out of bed, and then someone going downstairs, and then someone walking up the road again. And so you've got this almost poetic structure where it rhymes, where it's coming, and it's basically, it starts off outside the house, walking toward the house on a road, then in the house, then in bed, then in bed, then in the house, then walking up the road. And so you've got that repetition of a concept. And if you take this into the concepts of theology, if you take this into just narrative structure, this is partly how Hebrew structures are written. And you even see a lot of this in English, and so it's really fascinating stuff. And so keep an eye out for that. And like I said, the Bible Project does a really good job of demonstrating this. So I pulled up an example right here, and I want to demonstrate with the book of Zechariah. So it's a little side note here. And what the Bible Project does is they draw out examples of what the Bible is meaning in some of these contexts. But I want you to see this because this is an example of a chiasmus, and it is going to show you in real time what this looks like. And so just, I'll pop out here for a sec, let you guys watch this, and this will be an example of what a lot of Hebrew poetry will do.
Section is a collection of 8 nighttime visions that Zechariah experienced. And just to prepare you, these are full of very bizarre, strange images, a lot like your dreams. The idea that God communicates to people through symbolic dreams, it's very old. It goes back to the book of Genesis. The dreams of Jacob or Joseph or Pharaoh, these gave meaning to current events at the time, but they also gave a window into the future. And so Zechariah has his own dreams now, and they've been arranged in this really cool symmetrical design. The first and the last visions are about 4 horsemen each. They're like rangers patrolling the world on God's behalf, and it's a representation of God's attentive watch over the nations. Their report is that the world is at peace. And in Zechariah's day, this refers to how God raised up Persia to conquer Babylon and bring peace. And so the question now arises. The 70 years of Israel's exile are almost up. Is now the time for the Messianic kingdom in Jerusalem? And God responds by saying that he's determined to fulfill those promises, but he leaves the question of timing unanswered. The second and seventh visions are paired because they're both reflections on Israel's past sin that led up to the exile. So the second vision is about these horns that symbolize the nations that attacked and then scattered Israel, Assyria and Babylon. But then these horns or empires are themselves scattered by a group of blacksmiths, an image for Persia. The seventh dream is about a woman in a basket, and we're told that she's a symbol of the centuries of Israel's covenant rebellion. And then this woman is carried off to Babylon by other women who carry the basket flying with stork wings. This is so strange. The third and sixth visions are paired as they're both about the rebuilding of a new Jerusalem. So a man is measuring the city. It's an image of God's promise that Jerusalem will be rebuilt and become a beacon to the nations who will join God's people in worship. And then the sixth dream is about a scroll that flies around the new Jerusalem, punishing thieves and liars. The idea being that the new Jerusalem is a place that's purified from sin by the scriptures. The fourth and fifth visions are at the center of this collection, and they're about the two key leaders among the returned exiles. So Joshua, the high priest, and then Zerubbabel, the royal descendant of David. So Joshua had been symbolically wearing Israel's sin in the form of these dirty clothes. But then those are taken off, and he's given new clothes and a new turban, a symbol of God's grace and forgiveness. And then an angel tells Joshua that if he remains faithful to God, he will lead his people, and Joshua will become a symbol of the future Messianic king. The other vision is about two olive trees that supply oil to this elaborate gold lamp, which itself is a symbol of God's watchful eye over his people. And these two trees symbolize the two anointed leaders, Joshua and then Zerubbabel, who's leading the temple rebuilding efforts. And God says that success will not come to this new temple if it's the result only of political maneuvering. Rather, these two leaders must be dependent upon the work of God's Spirit. The visions come to a close with a bonus vision from the prophet, and it picks up the themes of the central fourth and fifth visions. It's Joshua, the high priest again, and he's given a crown and presented as a symbol of the future Messiah, who will also be a priest over God's kingdom. And then Zechariah closes it all out, saying that all of these visions will be fulfilled only if the current generation is faithful to God and obeys the terms of the covenant. And so altogether, these three visions emphasize how the coming of the Messianic kingdom is conditional upon this generation being faithful to God, which leads to the conclusion of the dreams. It's another challenge from Zechariah, and a group of Israelites come, and they've been mourning over the former temple's destruction for nearly 70 years.
So this gives you that example of what I'm discussing. And so you've got, if I zoom out here, I know it's going to lose a little bit of content. Actually, I can go this way. And so what these guys do is they try to present all this. But take a look here on this. I'll maximize the screen for you. And so you start off right here, and you've got the first concept, which is repeated at the end. And then you've got, so this would be A, repetition of A, B, repetition of B, C, repetition of C, D, repetition of D. So this is the idea there, because when you've got this content, the Hebrews are writing in this way, and that's what you're going to expect, is this repetition. Now again, there are other aspects that will come into play. There's connection points and various things. And you've got books, I believe the Book of Esther, like I said, is one that is set up entirely in this format. So again, just fascinating stuff if you're into that type of material. And again, just going forward, there's a few other things you need to know about Ecclesiastes, in that it is biographical in the sense that it contains biographical elements. It is not a complete biography. It is not a 100%. This is everything that I did in my life. But again, there's a lot of good content in there. He's going to talk about his wisdom, his building efforts, his wealth, his studies, his trade, all that. But again, it's not going to get into his idolatry. It's not going to get into a lot of those other aspects. That's why people sometimes doubt whether this was written by Solomon. But again, I come back to, it is written by Solomon. And if you don't believe it's written by Solomon, then you believe it's written by someone pretending to be Solomon, and they still didn't see fit to include all the idolatry. So either way you cut it, they have intentionally left out the idolatry stuff. Now the book is going to hop into third person, which implies that Solomon is writing it kind of later in life, or perhaps there is someone who is collecting all this information and commenting on it. But again, any writer can do little games to accentuate what he's trying to say. And again, I believe the third person is Solomon just kind of distancing himself from things and kind of talking almost like that was a different me who did all of that. So again, it is not a complete biography. There's a lot of little tricks that are being played. It's not trying to tell you everything Solomon did in his life. I would reference to make a comparison, I would reference something like the book of John. The book of John is going to say that the stuff in this book is specifically written so that you would know that Jesus is the Son of God. That's it. That's the point. It says that at the very end. It says, these, there's so much more we could say, but these things have I written unto you that you know that he's the Son of God. And then it says, I suppose if we wrote everything down, the world couldn't contain all those books. Okay, and he's just making the point to say there's so much more about the life of Christ. I mean, it starts off with his birth, and then the next story is like, him as a junior hire, to use that comparison, and then suddenly it's like he's 30, and you're like, so what did he do? He probably did a whole lot, but the point of a lot of the Gospels is to tell you the key moments of Jesus' life. The point of the book of John is to clarify and say, these are the specific details you need to know. So again, just understand, the Bible is not trying to be to tell you everything that ever happened with every character. It says that several other places. It doesn't need to repeat it here. So now next time we come back, there will be a little discussion here on whether Ecclesiastes is canon. I believe it is, obviously, and there was a lot of discussion of that through the ages. But again, just something to keep in mind that it was an argument. There was a lot of people who struggled with it because, again, as we get into the text of Ecclesiastes, you're going to understand there's a lot of weird stuff.